The Velthary cluster had known gods for 10,000 years. Every species in the cluster told the same story. Their ancestors had looked up at the stars and prayed, and the stars had answered. The Ascended Ones lived within the Sanctum Nebula, a swirling mass of purple and gold gases that stretched across 3 star systems. They were beings of pure light and power. They could cure any disease. They could end any war. They could bring rain to dying crops and fire to those who dared to disobey. No one questioned this. It was simply true. It had always been true. The Kethari were a proud species. They had 4 arms and skin the color of whetstone. They had built great cities and sailing ships and eventually spacecraft. But even they bent their knees to the sanctum. Once every cycle, their greatest ship would fly to the edge of the nebula. It would stop at the boundary, and its crew would speak the sacred words. They would offer tribute rare metals, precious gems, sometimes even living beings chosen for sacrifice. Then they would wait. Sometimes the gods answered. Sometimes they did not. When they did answer, miracles happened. Plagues vanished overnight. Enemy fleets exploded in bowls of divine fire. The Kethari recorded every miracle in their holy books, and they never stopped believing. The Dromulan were different. They were tall and thin, with long necks and eyes that could see heat. They had ruled a small empire once, before the gods punished them for their pride. 3 of their colony worlds had burned in a single night. After that, the Dromulan had become the most faithful servants of the Ascended Ones. Their priests controlled everything. No decision was made without prayer. No child was named without blessing. The Dromulan did not just believe, they needed to believe. The alternative was to admit that their ancestors had died for nothing. The Yasari were the saddest of all. They were small creatures with soft fur and gentle voices. Long ago, their world had suffered a terrible famine. Their leaders had flown to the sanctum and begged for help. The gods had answered. Rain fell, crops grew. The Yasari survived, but the gods demanded a price. Every generation. The Yasari chose their most perfect children, the healthiest, the smartest, the most beautiful, and sent them to the sanctum as offerings. No one knew what happened to them inside the nebula. No ship that entered ever returned. But the Yasari believed their children became one with the divine. It made the loss easier to bear. This was the way of things. This was the order of the universe. The gods ruled from their sacred home, and the mortal species obeyed Dot, and then the humans arrived. The UN's Prometheus was not a special ship. It was a Defender-class destroyer, one of hundreds in the United Nations Space Fleet. It carried 300 crew members, a decent weapons array, and an experimental faster-than-light drive that its engineers were still trying to understand. The ship had been conducting a routine test jump near the edge of human space when something went wrong. The drive sputtered. Reality twisted. And when the stars reappeared on the view screen, no one recognized them. Captain Elena Vasquez was a practical woman. She was 43 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes from too many years of squinting at star charts. She had commanded the Prometheus for 5 years, and she had learned that panicking never helped anything. "Report," she said calmly. Even though her heart was beating faster than normal, Lieutenant Park checked his instruments twice before answering. "We're approximately 18,000 light years from our last position, Captain." The drive overshot by a factor of, "Well, a lot. Can we jump back?" "The drive needs to recharge. Minimum 12 hours. Probably more." Vasquez nodded. 12 hours was not so bad. They had food, water, and air. They were not in immediate danger. Scan the area. Let's see where we ended up. The sensors painted a picture of an unknown region of space. There were several star systems nearby, some with planets that showed signs of life. And directly ahead, dominating the view screen, was a massive nebula. It glowed with colors that seemed almost artificial: deep purple, bright gold, streaks of crimson red. "That's beautiful," someone whispered. Dr. Yusuf Okonkwo, the ship's chief science officer, was already studying the readings. He was a tall man from Nigeria, with a shaved head and glasses that he insisted on wearing, even though his vision had been corrected decades ago. "The nebula is producing unusual radiation patterns," he said. "Possibly natural, possibly not. I would need to get closer to be certain." "Is it dangerous?" Vasquez asked. "Our shields should handle it. The radiation is intense, but not beyond our specifications." Vasquez considered this. They were lost in unknown space. They had 12 hours to wait. And there was a mysterious nebula right in front of them that might contain answers, or at least something interesting to report when they got home. "Take us in," she ordered. "Slow and careful. If anything looks wrong, we pull back." The Prometheus moved forward. Its engines hummed softly as it crossed into the outer edges of the nebula. The swirling gases surrounded the ship, blocking out the stars. For a few minutes, they flew blind, relying only on their instruments, and then they came out the other side. What they saw made everyone on the bridge fall silent. There was a station. It was enormous, bigger than any space station humanity had ever built. It hung in the center of the nebula like a metal spider in a web of light. Around it, hundreds of smaller ships floated in perfect formation. They were of different designs, from different species, but they all shared one thing in common. They were old. Very old. Some of them looked like they had been waiting there for centuries. "What is this place?" Lieutenant Park asked. Before anyone could answer, the communications console lit up. A signal was coming through, not in any human language, but the translation software worked quickly. Within seconds, a voice filled the bridge. It was deep and powerful, and it seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You have entered the sanctum," the voice said. "Kneel before the ascended ones, offer your tribute, or be destroyed." Captain Vasquez looked at the view screen. She looked at the massive station and the ancient ships and the swirling nebula that had hidden this place for thousands of years. Then she leaned forward in her chair. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the UNS Prometheus," she said. "We're not from around here. And I have a question before we do any kneeling." She paused. "What exactly are you?" The silence that followed was deafening. The voice did not answer right away. Captain Vasquez waited, her hands resting on the arms of her chair. Around her, the bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. They had all heard the threat. They had all seen the massive station and hundreds of ships that surrounded it. No one knew what would happen next. Finally, the voice returned. It was even louder than before, and there was something in it that sounded almost like confusion. "You dare to question the Ascended Ones?" It thundered. "We are the gods of this cluster. We have ruled these stars for 10,000 years. We have burned worlds and raised civilizations. We are eternal. We are divine." Vasquez tilted her head slightly. "That's a very impressive speech," she said. "But it doesn't answer my question. I asked what you are, not what you claim to be." More silence. On the tactical display, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen noticed something. 3 smaller objects had separated from the main station. They were moving fast, heading straight for the Prometheus. "Captain," she said quietly, "we have incoming 3 attack drones. They'll reach us in about 90 seconds. Vasquez did not take her eyes off the view screen. "What kind of weapons?" "Scanning now." Chen's fingers flew across her console. "Plasma-based. High energy output. If they hit us at full power, our shields might not hold." "Might not?" "It's hard to be certain, Captain. The technology looks old, very old, but still dangerous." The voice spoke again. Your insolence will be punished. Watch now as divine fire cleanses your vessel. Let this be a lesson to all who would challenge the gods. The 3 drones opened fire. Bright streaks of plasma shot through the nebula, lighting up the gas clouds like lightning in a storm. They were beautiful in a terrible way. For a moment, everyone on the bridge held their breath. Then the plasma bolts hit the Prometheus's shields. The ship shook slightly. Warning lights flickered on a few consoles. But that was all. Dr. Okonkwo checked his readings and blinked in surprise. Shield integrity at 94%, he reported. The weapons are powerful, but our shields are designed to handle worse. Much worse. Vasquez nodded slowly. Return fire, she ordered. Disable those drones. Chun did not hesitate. The Prometheus was equipped with particle beam cannons, weapons that humanity had developed after decades of research and testing. They were precise, fast, and incredibly destructive. She targeted the first drone, calculated its speed and trajectory, and fired. The drone exploded. She targeted the second drone. It tried to evade, but it was too slow. Another shot, another explosion. The third drone turned to retreat. Chun destroyed it before it had traveled 100 meters. The entire engagement lasted 4.7 seconds. Silence fell over the bridge. Not the tense silence of before. This was something different. This was the silence of people who had just realized something important. Captain, Lieutenant Park said slowly, did we just beat the gods? Vasquez did not answer. She was watching the view screen, watching the massive station that still hung in the center of the nebula. Nothing was moving. No more drones were launching. It was as if the entire place was frozen in shock. Then Dr. Okonkwo spoke. His voice was quiet, but everyone heard him clearly. Captain, I've completed my analysis of the drone debris. The plasma weapons are advanced, but they're based on principles that humanity moved past 30 years ago. And the drones themselves. He paused, checking his data again. They're at least 2,000 years old. Maybe older. The same basic design, with no updates or improvements. What are you saying? Vasquez asked. I'm saying that these gods have very old technology. Powerful by the standards of this region, perhaps. But not by ours. And they haven't improved it at all. Not in thousands of years. Vasquez felt something cold settle in her stomach. She was beginning to understand what they had stumbled into. 10,000 years of worship. Hundreds of species bowing to the sanctum. Miracles and divine punishment and absolute power. And it was all based on technology that the Prometheus could match, maybe even surpass. Scan the station, she ordered. Full analysis. I want to know everything about it. The scan took several minutes. When it was complete, Dr. Okonkwo projected the results onto the main screen. The entire bridge crew stared in disbelief. The station was not built by the beings. Inside it was far older than any civilization currently living in the cluster. Millions of years old, maybe more. The technology was beyond anything the Prometheus's sensors could fully understand, but the beings living inside were not. They were biological, mortal. They breathed, they ate, they aged. They had simply found this ancient station and claimed it as their own. There are approximately 2,000 life forms on the station, Okonkwo said. All of the same species. They call themselves the Varith, according to the database fragments we've been able to access. They were the first species in this cluster to develop space travel. They found this station about 12,000 years ago, and they've been pretending to be gods ever since, Vasquez finished. Yes, Captain. Every miracle, every punishment, it was all just technology. The divine fire is plasma weaponry. The plagues they cured were treated with medical technology from the station. The storms they created were generated by atmospheric manipulation devices. None of it was supernatural. It was all science. The bridge was completely silent. Vasquez thought about the species she had learned about on the way in. The Cathari, who had offered tribute for 10,000 years. The Dromulan, whose ancestors had been burned alive for the crime of pride. The Yazari, who had given up their children. All of it for a lie. The voice spoke again, but this time it was different. The power and confidence were gone. It sounded almost desperate. "Leave this place," it demanded. "Leave now and never return. Forget what you have seen. We will let you go. We will give you anything you want. Just leave." Vasquez stood up from her chair. She walked closer to the view screen, looking at the ancient station that had terrified an entire cluster of stars. "No," she said simply. "What?" "I said no. We're not leaving. And we're not forgetting anything." She turned to her crew. "Open a channel to the station. Full visual. I want to see exactly who I'm talking to." A moment later, the view screen changed. The swirling nebula was replaced by an image of the station's interior. And standing in the center of the frame was a VARETH dot. It was tall and thin, with pale skin and large black eyes. It wore robes decorated with gold and jewels. It looked old, very old and tired. And for the first time in 10,000 years, it looked afraid. "I am High Priest Kalen," it said. Its voice was no longer amplified or distorted. It was just a voice. "Please, you do not understand what you are doing. If the other species learn the truth, everything will fall apart. There will be chaos, war. Billions could die." Vasquez met its eyes through the screen. "They deserve to know," she said. "They deserve the truth. And I'm going to make sure they get it." Callan's face twisted with rage. "Then you leave us no choice," it hissed. "If you will not leave quietly, you will not leave at all." The station's weapons powered up. Every gun, every missile, every defense system that had protected the false gods for millennia came online at one dot, and Captain Elena Vasquez smiled. The station opened fire with everything it had. Plasma cannons, missile launchers, energy beams that had destroyed entire fleets. All of it came screaming toward the Prometheus at once. The nebula lit up like a star being born. On any other day, against any other ship, it would have been enough to end the battle in seconds. But the Prometheus was not like the ships the Vareth had faced before. Evasive Pattern Delta. Captain Vasquez ordered calmly. "Return fire at will." The ship moved. It danced through the storm of weapons fire like a leaf in the wind, twisting and spinning in ways that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. The human pilots had trained for years. They had practiced against simulated enemies far more dangerous than this. The ancient weapons of the Vareth were fast, but they were not fast enough. Lieutenant Commander Chun did not miss. Her first shot took out a weapons platform on the station's outer ring. Her second destroyed a missile launcher before it could fire. Her third, fourth, and fifth punched holes in the station's shield generators, weakening its defenses bit by bit. "Shield status?" Vasquez asked. 81%, Lieutenant Park reported. "We're taking hits, but nothing serious. Their weapons are powerful, but they're slow, predictable. We can see them coming. Keep firing. Aim for weapons only. I don't want to destroy the station completely. Just make them stop." The battle continued, but it was not much of a battle. It was more like a lesson. For 10,000 years, the Vareth had never faced a real challenge. The species of the cluster came to them on their knees, offering tribute and begging for mercy. When someone did resist, the Vareth simply overwhelmed them with technology they did not understand. It was easy. It was safe. And because it was easy and safe, the Vareth had never needed to grow. Humanity was different. Humans had grown up on a dangerous world. They had fought ice ages and famines and diseases that killed millions. They had nearly destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons before learning to control their worst instincts. They had clawed their way into space one painful step at a time, building ships that could survive anything the Paliran thing their universe threw at them. The Vareth had inherited their power. Humanity had earned theirs. 11 minutes after the battle began, it ended. The station's weapons were silent. Its shields had collapsed. Dozens of small fires burned on its surface, sending smoke into the nebula's swirling gases. Damage report, Vasquez said. Hull breaches on decks 7 and 12, Park answered. Meyer, already sealed. 3 crew members with light injuries. Nothing life-threatening. And the station? Dr. Okonkwo checked his sensors. Weapon systems are offline. Life support is still functioning. Most of the Vareth are still alive, but they're not going anywhere. Vasquez nodded. She felt tired, but also something that felt almost like relief. Open a channel to High Priest Kalen. A moment later, the view screen showed the station's interior again. It was not the same as before. Smoke filled the air. Warning lights flashed everywhere. And Kalen stood in the middle of the chaos, his robes torn, his face covered in dust and blood. He looked broken. It's over, Vasquez said. Stand down. Order your people to surrender. Kalen stared at her. His eyes were empty. You don't understand, he whispered. You can't understand. We are the gods. We have always been the gods. Without us, the cluster will collapse. The other species need us. They need something to believe in. No, Vasquez replied. They don't, and you're not gods. You're just people who found something powerful and used it to control everyone else. That ends today. Kalen fell to his knees. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he laughed a bitter, hollow sound. You think this is a victory? He asked. You think you're saving them? The Ketheri have worshipped us for 10,000 years. The Dromulan built their entire civilization on faith in us. The Yizari. Do you know what we did with their children? Vasquez felt her stomach tighten. Tell me. We took them as servants. Slaves, really. They work in the lower levels of the station, maintaining the systems, cleaning the halls. We told their parents they had become one with the divine. Kalen laughed again. When the Yizari learn the truth, they will not thank you. They will break. Every species in this cluster will break. Maybe, Vasquez said. Maybe breaking is the first step to becoming something better. Something real. She turned to her communications officer. Send a message to every ship outside the nebula. Tell them what we found. Send them everything, our sensor logs, our battle recordings, everything. They need to see the truth. The officer hesitated. Captain, are you sure? This could cause. I'm sure. Do it. The message went out. It traveled through the nebula and burst into open space. It reached the pilgrim ships that waited at the boundary, the ones that came to offer tribute and pray for miracles. It reached the relay stations that connected the different species of the cluster. And from there, it spread like fire. Ours, every inhabited world in the Veltharic cluster, received the transmission. The reaction was immediate. On Keth Prime, the holiest of Kethari worlds, millions of people watched their gods lose a battle to a single unknown ship. They saw the station's weapons fail. They heard the High Priest admit that divine fire was just plasma, that miracles were just technology, that 10,000 years of faith had been built on nothing but lies. Some refused to believe. They called it a trick, a test of their devotion. But the evidence was too clear, too complete. Even the most devoted priests could not explain away what they had seen. Riots broke out in the temple districts. Sacred buildings that had stood for centuries were torn down by crowds that screamed and wept and did not know what to believe anymore. On the Dromulan homeworld, The theocracy fell within days. The priests who had controlled every aspect of life were dragged from their palaces. Some were killed. Others fled into hiding. The people demanded answers, and when they learned that their leaders had known the truth for generations, had traded their freedom for favors from the Varith, their rage became unstoppable. The Yazari response was the worst when they learned what had happened to their children. When they understood that their perfect sons and daughters had not become divine beings, but slaves, something broke inside them as a species. For days, their worlds went silent. No transmissions, no movement, no signs of life at all. When they finally spoke again, their voices had changed. There was no softness left, only cold, terrible resolve. The Prometheus remained inside the nebula, its crew watching as the cluster tore itself apart. Some of them wondered if they had made the right choice. Some of them felt guilty for the chaos they had caused. But Captain Vasquez did not regret anything. The truth is always better than a lie, she told her crew, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. These people spent 10,000 years on their knees. It's time for them to stand up. She looked out at the stars that were no longer ruled by false gods, and were going to help them. 3 weeks passed. The Prometheus did not leave the Valkyrie cluster. Captain Vasquez had sent a message back to Earth, explaining what had happened and asking for instructions. The reply came quickly. Stay where you are, help if you can, and try not to start any wars. It was easier said than done. The cluster was falling apart. Old governments collapsed overnight. Religious leaders who had held power for centuries were thrown out of office or worse. Trade routes shut down as species that had once trusted each other now looked at everyone with suspicion. Food shortages began on some worlds. On others, civil war. But slowly, something new started to form. The first message came from the Cathari. It arrived on the Prometheus's communication system late one night, while most of the crew was sleeping. Lieutenant Park was on duty, and he almost dismissed it as noise before realizing what it was. A request for contact. An invitation to talk. Captain Vasquez met with the Cathari ambassador 3 days later. His name was Torath, and he was old even by his species' long standards. His stone-gray skin was cracked and worn, and he moved slowly, as if every step cost him effort. But his eyes were sharp, and his voice was steady. We have watched your recordings many times, Torath said. They sat in the Prometheus's meeting room, a simple space with a metal table and chairs designed for human bodies. Torath's forearms hung at his sides, a sign of humility Vasquez had learned. We have analyzed every detail. We know what you did was real. I'm sorry, Vasquez said. And she meant it. I know this has been difficult for your people. Torath made a sound that might have been a laugh. Difficult. Yes, that is one word for it. We built our entire civilization on faith in the Ascended Ones. Our laws, our art, our sense of purpose, everything connected to them. Now that faith is gone, and we must decide what comes next. What have you decided? Torath was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked directly at Vasquez with those ancient, knowing eyes. We have decided to be angry, he said. And then we have decided to be better. He explained what the Cathari leaders were planning. They wanted to form a new alliance, not based on worship or fear, but on cooperation and mutual respect. They wanted to invite every species in the cluster to join, and they wanted humanity to help them build it. You showed us the truth, Torath said. You could have kept it secret. You could have used it to make yourselves our new gods. But you did not. That tells us something about your people. We would like to learn more. Vasquez felt something warm spread through her chest. It was not pride exactly, more like hope. We would be honored to help, she said. Over the next few months, the Prometheus became something it had never been designed to be, a diplomatic vessel. Captain Vasquez met with representatives from dozens of species. Some were grateful. Some were suspicious. A few were openly hostile, blaming humanity for the chaos that had consumed their worlds. But most were simply tired of lies. Tired of fear. Tired of being told what to believe, instead of being allowed to find the truth themselves. The Dromulan were the hardest to reach. Their theocracy had controlled every aspect of their lives, and its fall had left them lost and confused. Many of them did not know how to make decisions without priests to guide them. They had been taught from birth that thinking for themselves was dangerous. Even sinful Dr. Okonkwo led the effort to help them. He was patient and kind, and he understood what it was like to rebuild after losing everything you believed in. When I was young, he told a group of Dromulan leaders, my grandmother told me that the Earth was only 6,000 years old. She believed it completely. When I learned the truth, that our planet was billions of years old, I felt betrayed, angry. It took me a long time to understand that my grandmother was not a liar. She had simply been taught wrong by people she trusted. The Dromulan listened. Slowly, carefully, they began to trust. The Yasari were different. When they finally emerged from their silence, they did not come with requests for help or offers of friendship. They came with demands. A Yasari warship arrived at the nebula, one of the few they had kept after becoming servants of the Varith. It was small and old, but it carried a message that could not be ignored. We want our children, the Yasari commander said. Her name was Selvith, and her voice was like ice. Every Yasari who was taken as tribute. We know they are on the station. We want them returned. Vasquez had been expecting this. I understand, she said. We've already begun preparing for their release. There are 342 Yasari on the station, ranging from very young to very old. We're setting up medical facilities to help them adjust. Some of them have been slaves for their entire lives. They will need time. Selva's expression did not change. We will take them. All of them, today. Commander, please. Some of them don't even remember their homeworld. They've been told they're worthless, that their only purpose is to serve. If we just throw them back without support, it could destroy them. For a long moment, Selva said nothing. Her small hands were clenched into fists. Her fur, normally soft and gentle, stood on end with barely controlled rage. For generations, she finally said, we gave up our best. Our brightest. Our most loved. We told ourselves it was an honor. We believed they had become something greater. Her voice cracked. They were scrubbing floors. They were cleaning the boots of creatures who called themselves gods. Vasquez walked closer to the screen. I know, she said softly. And I'm sorry. More sorry than I can express. But your children need you to be strong now. They need you to be patient. Can you do that? For them? Selvith closed her eyes. When she opened them again, some of the ice had melted. Yes, she whispered. For them, I can do anything. The release of the Yasari captives became the first great project of the new alliance. Medical teams from 6 different species worked together. Counselors were trained. Families were reunited one by one. Carefully, gently. It was not easy. Some of the former slaves could not believe they were free. Some lashed out in fear. A few had been so broken by their captivity that they would never fully recover. But many of them healed. And watching them heal, watching the different species work together to undo even a small part of the damage the Varith had caused, gave everyone hope that the Galactic Secular Compact was officially formed 6 months after the Prometheus first entered the nebula. 12 species signed the founding document. More would join in the years to come. And at the signing ceremony, the representative from Earth, a young diplomat named James, who had arrived on a rescue ship 2 months earlier, Read the words that would become the Alliance's motto. We are not gods. We are not chosen. We are simply people, doing our best in an uncaring universe. And together, we are enough. The day the Prometheus prepared to leave, representatives from every species in the Galactic Secular Compact came to say goodbye. Their ships filled the space around the nebula, hundreds of them, of all shapes and sizes. Some were sleek and modern, built in the months since the truth had been revealed. Others were old vessels that had once carried tributes to false gods. Now they carried free people who had come to honor the ship that had changed everything. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge, looking at the fleet through the view screen. She had aged in the months since arriving in the cluster. There were more gray hairs now, more lines on her face. But there was also something else, a sense of peace that had not been there before. It's quite a sight, Dr. Okonkwo said, standing beside her. When we first jumped into this region, we were lost and alone. Now look at us. Vasquez smiled. We didn't do this alone, Yusuf. We just opened a door. They walked through it themselves. A communication request appeared on her console. She accepted it, and the view screen split to show a dozen faces. Torath of the Cathari, Selvith of the Yazari, the new leader of the Dromulan Republic, and many others. They had all become familiar to her over the past months. Some had even become friends. Captain Vasquez, Torath said. His voice was warm, but there was sadness in it too. We understand you must return to your home. Your people will be wondering what happened to you. But before you go, we wanted to offer you something. What kind of something? Vasquez asked carefully. Torath glanced at the others, then continued. The Galactic Secular Compact has voted. We want to offer you a position, any position you wish. You could be an ambassador, connecting your Earth to our alliance. You could be a governor, leading one of our new joint colonies. Or, he paused. You could be more? More? The Dromulan leader spoke up. His name was Vethan, and he had been one of the priests who had known the truth about the Virith. He had been the first to turn against his own government when the recordings were released. Several species have suggested making you our symbolic leader, he said. Not a ruler, we have had enough of those, but a figurehead, a living reminder of what happened and what we can become. Vasquez was silent for a long moment. She looked at the faces on the screen, the faces of beings who had offered her more power than most humans ever dreamed of. Then she shook her head. I'm honored, she said. Truly I am. But I can't accept. Selvith leaned forward. The Yazari commander had softened in the months since their first meeting. She had watched her people heal, had held children who had been lost for decades, had begun to smile again. May we ask why? Because that's not what this was about, Vasquez said. We came here by accident. We found a lie and we told the truth. That's all. If I let you make me into something special, something above everyone else, then we're just starting. The same cycle all over again. She stood up from her chair and walked closer to the view screen. The Varith ruled you because you believed you needed something greater than yourselves. Gods, chosen ones, special beings with special powers. But you never needed that. You had everything you needed right here. She placed her hand over her heart. The strength was always yours. I just helped you see it. The leaders on the screen were quiet. Some of them looked disappointed. Others looked thoughtful. But slowly, one by one, they began to nod. You are a strange species, Torath said finally. You have the power to take, and you choose to give. You have the chance to rule, and you choose to walk away. I do not fully understand you. Vasquez laughed. We don't fully understand ourselves, Torath. We're still figuring things out. Maybe in a few thousand years, we'll have better answers. Then we will wait, Torath said. and we will welcome you when you return. The formal ceremony was short. Each species sent a gift, not tribute. They were careful to explain, but a token of friendship. The Githari gave a piece of stone from their oldest mountain. The Dromulan gave a book of their new laws, written by common people instead of priests. The Yazari gave a recording of their children's laughter, captured on the day the last slave was freed from the station. Vasquez accepted each gift personally. She thanked each representative by name. She promised that humanity would remember what had happened here. And then it was time to go. The Prometheus's engines hummed to life. The ship turned slowly, pointing toward the edge of the nebula, toward the long journey home. The fleet of allied vessels moved aside, forming a corridor of lights to guide them out. Course plotted. Lieutenant Park reported. FTL drive is fully charged. We can jump whenever you're ready. Vasquez took one last look at the Sanctum Nebula. The ancient station still floated at its center, but it was different now. It had been converted into a research center, a place where scientists from every species could study the technology inside. The secrets of the long-dead builders were being unlocked one by one, not to rule over others, but to help everyone equally. The Vareth were still there too. Not as gods, not as prisoners, but as teachers. Many of them had chosen to share what they knew about the station systems. They had spent 10,000 years learning its secrets. Now they passed that knowledge on freely, hoping to undo at least some of the damage they had caused. It was not justice. Not really. Nothing could bring back the generations lost to false worship. The children taken as slaves. The worlds burned by plasma fire, disguised as divine anger. But it was something. A beginning. Take us home, Vasquez ordered. The Prometheus jumped. Stars stretched and twisted around them. The nebula disappeared. And then they were somewhere else entirely, back in familiar space. Only a few light years from Earth. Cheers erupted on the bridge. Crew members hugged each other. Someone started crying. They had been gone for almost a year, lost in a distant corner of the galaxy. Now they were home. Vasquez sat back in her chair and closed her eyes. She thought about the species they had left behind. The Githari, learning to make their own choices. The Dromulan, building a society based on reason instead of faith. The Yasari, healing from wounds that should have been impossible to survive. She thought about what would happen when Earth learned about the Velthari cluster. The politicians would argue about treaties and trade agreements. The scientists would want to study the ancient station. The military would worry about threats and defenses. But somewhere, she hoped, people would understand what had really happened. A single ship had stumbled into a galaxy of gods and asked a simple question: what exactly are you? And in answering that question, 100 worlds had learned the most important truth of all. There are no gods. There never were. There is only us, mortal, flawed, struggling, and free. And that is enough. That has always been enough. The Prometheus drifted through the stars, carrying its crew toward home, toward new adventures, toward whatever came next. Behind them, in the Velthari cluster, the species of the Secular Compact were building a future for themselves. It would be messy. It would be painful. They would make mistakes. They would fight and disagree and sometimes fail, but they would do it themselves, and that made all the difference.